Well, first of all, you said I was a supporter of action on climate change. Well, yes, but we should all be.
Yeah, we should.
Any human being who thinks we need a future, which is all of us, should be worried about climate change, because it is probably the biggest threat that we face for the continuity of our way of life. We're monitoring how much electricity we use, and we're trying to reduce that. Here in the office, we're in a large office which has a central air conditioning system, but we try to take our air conditioning use down. For example, we have put blinds in the windows, so on sunny days, which is most of the time a sunny morning, we put the blinds down at night, so on a sunny morning when the sun comes up, it's not heating up our offices so much, and therefore we don't need to use our air conditioning as much. We're also taking action on plastics, which is a separate problem from climate change, but it does have an impact on climate change, because the more plastic we produce, it's a wasteful use of emissions as you create a plastic bottle or any other form of plastic. So by reducing plastic use, we can have some impact on carbon emissions, but also reduce the amount of plastic that is growing in our landfill sites and in the oceans. We've stopped using plastic bottles and plastic plates and cutlery and straws. If I go to an event and I sit at a table and I see a long line of plastic bottles, I will say something very politely. But we should be thinking about that sort of thing. The British government has recognised this for, decades, and has been taking action, and we have set really ambitious targets, and we have helped our people and our companies make the steps that are necessary by providing regulatory frameworks. Progress is not bad at all. I think better than many countries, but there's still a lot more to do. So there's still a sense of urgency. And when we have temperatures, the temperature here today in Taipei is similar to yesterday in London. Now, that is so unusual in London. We hit a record yesterday of the heat, the level of temperature in London. So it's urgent, and on the offshore wind, over 10 years ago now, we wanted to transition to more renewable energy. So there was work on solar energy as well, and other sources. But offshore wind was a more ambitious plan, because it needed a lot of engineering out at sea. So it needed a lot of companies involved, a lot of different trade associations, individuals, their communities. It involved a lot of people. So it needed the government to try to bring people together and give guidance and consult, and so carry them together in making a change. So there was a lot of effort that went into that consultation and guiding process. But the actors involved are private companies and individuals, whether it's the big developers who are planning an offshore wind farm, or a small company that is providing in the supply chain, or an individual who lives in a community by the seaside that is being impacted by this new development. So fishermen who have been able to transform their lives. Some fishermen have continued to work in the fishing industry, maybe supplying fish to a larger population in in their town as more people have come in to work on the offshore farms, or fishermen who have changed their lives by offering services from their boats to taking people out to the wind farms, tourism and people who need to go out to the wind farms for work.
With
so
the government's help?
Yes. So we provided the framework, we encouraged the consultations, and then individuals, small companies, large companies have moved ahead with the work. So it's quite an exciting transformation in several places. You went to Grampian, but there are other wind farms around the UK, and it has had an impact, creating jobs and creating new companies. So it's been very exciting for us, and I think it is bound to be the same for Taiwan. So we're quite excited about what you're going to experience here. You're going to have much better supply of energy, renewable energy. You're going to have new jobs, new industries, and you're going to put Taiwan on the map as being ahead of anybody else in Asia on developing your offshore wind, which you can then use to serve offshore wind development in the region. So it's really exciting. And I wouldn't characterize ours as purely encouragement. I mean, encouragement takes many forms. If a government introduces subsidies,
yes,
for certain behaviours, for example, in the UK, subsidies to help individuals who own a house to insulate it properly, so that you have an issue here where you use a lot of air conditioning to keep things cool.
Right.
We have an issue where we use a lot of heating to keep things warm. So if you have a properly insulated house, then you won't need to heat it as much. You put thick insulation in the roofs and in the walls. So the government has offered subsidies to help people do that. But then the energy suppliers, the big companies that supply energy, they have been required to change their energy mix. So that is, I wouldn't characterize as enforcement quite, because that sounds quite strong, but it is a legal requirement for them to transition. We have our Climate Change Act,
right,
which requires, by law,
yes,
it requires successive governments, doesn't matter who's in charge, which party, any government, and there's a cross-party consensus on this, have to reduce emissions by certain amounts. So, well, 80% by 2050, and now we've got a net zero.
Right.
The law established 80% by 2050, 80% on the 1990 levels. But now we've got a policy of net zero. So in order to make that happen, it's governmental responsibility to make that happen. So they have to require, government has to require the energy providers, the companies that provide electricity, to meet that target. So yes, we are all being enforced, if you like, by the law that we have created. You create a framework, the law, you create policies that encourage, incentivize, and make legal requirements on people.
Do you think
and then it happens.
Do you think that the Taiwanese government is doing the same thing? Incentives and
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, this is an ambitious project. It's something that the Taiwanese government is designing from zero, from scratch.
Right.
It requires new policies, which the government has brought in. It requires expertise that exists elsewhere in the world to invite that expertise in, which will then transfer to local companies and people. Yeah. Well, so far, so good. There's been fantastic progress in the last year.
Okay.
Yeah, and then the future plans. Yes, I hope the rhythm will be maintained. Yeah.
Do you think that the same thing, the same supply network here, could happen to Asia?
I think in the European Union we have a particular circumstance, and that is a customs union. And that customs union and the single market within that has helped create flows of goods and services and people very freely between our countries. And in all sectors there is a big interconnection between producers of various different levels. So yes, there are quite long supply chains in some industries. So the fact of a single market has helped that development, but you don't need a single market.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at Taiwanese industry now, say your semiconductor industry, deeply embedded in international supply chains.
Yes.
That is Taiwan's forte, your strong point. You have got world-leading companies that are in the supply chains of some of the most important technology in the world.
Mm-hmm.
So I wouldn't worry about creating supply chains in the offshore wind, because you've already done it in other sectors.
Okay.
You don't need a European Union type arrangement or a single market to create supply chains.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that is part of our globalized world that we live in. It's just having a single market just speeds up the development, I guess.
Thank you very much.